There are books, and then there are artifacts, objects that are not merely read but experienced. They hold a certain gravity, a weight that comes not from ink and paper, but from the soul of the one who dared to write them. For nearly a century, one such book remained a secret, locked away in a Swiss bank vault, spoken of only in whispers among the intellectual elite. It was rumored to be the diary of a madman, the one piece of evidence that could unravel the legacy of a titan. This was the personal ledger of a man's descent into hell. This was Liber Novus, the new book. We know it today as the Red Book of Dr. Carl Gustav Jung. This book was Jung's most intimate and arduous secret. He, one of the founding fathers of modern psychology, the man who gave us concepts like the introvert, the extrovert, the archetype, and the collective unconscious, spent 16 years pouring his soul into this massive, leather-bound tome. He hand-wrote it in exquisite calligraphy, illustrating it with magnificent, terrifying paintings of his own visions. To the outside world, he was a renowned scientist of the mind. But in the pages of this book, he was a wanderer in a land of gods and monsters, a prophet wrestling with his own soul, a man on the very brink of insanity. He once said of this work, "To the superficial observer, it will appear like madness." And perhaps it is. But what if there is a kind of madness that is divine? A necessary madness that breaks open the shell of the rational mind to reveal something far more profound. The story of the Red Book is not the story of a man losing his mind. It is the story of a man finding his soul. It is a journey into the heart of darkness to reclaim the light. And it is a journey that holds a map for every single one of us. So, why was this book hidden for so long? And what terrifying, beautiful secrets does it hold about the hidden architecture of the human spirit? Let's descend into the divine madness of Dr. Carl Jung. Our story begins not with a vision, but with a rupture. A painful, public, and professionally devastating break. For years, Carl Jung was the crown prince of psychology, the chosen heir to the throne of its king, Sigmund Freud. Freud had illuminated the dark cellars of the mind, uncovering the unconscious, the world of repressed desires and childhood traumas. Jung was his most brilliant disciple, and the two shared a deep, almost father-son relationship. But the son could not remain in the shadow of the father forever. Jung began to see the limitations in Freud's theories. He felt Freud's obsession with sexuality as the root of all neurosis was tragically narrow. He sensed that the unconscious was not just a personal basement for our own repressed junk, but that it went deeper, opening into a vast, ancient ocean shared by all of humanity. A collective unconscious, filled with timeless symbols and myths, the archetypes. Furthermore, Jung could not accept Freud's deep-seated cynicism about human nature. Where Freud saw only pathology and repressed drives, Jung saw a profound spiritual yearning, a universal human need for meaning, for connection to something larger than the ego. He knew that publishing his dissenting ideas, particularly his reinterpretation of libido not as purely sexual energy but as a universal life force, would cost him everything. He wrote that for 2 months he was tormented, unable to even touch his pen, caught between loyalty to his friend and mentor and allegiance to his own emerging truth. In the end, truth won. The break was absolute. The psychological community which had once celebrated him now shunned him. His books were dismissed as rubbish. He was labeled a mystic, a heretic abandoning science for fantasy. In a single stroke, Jung lost his mentor, his friends, and his professional standing. He was utterly, terrifyingly alone. It is often in these moments of total isolation, in the desolate wilderness of the soul, that something new can be born. When the outer world collapses, the inner world demands to be heard. And for Jung, it did not whisper, it screamed. In the autumn of 1913, as Europe unknowingly sat on the precipice of the Great War, Jung felt a suffocating pressure building, not just within him, but in the very air around him. One day, on a journey, he was seized by a horrifying vision. He saw a monstrous flood of blood covering all of northern Europe, a tide of yellow waves filled with the debris of civilization and the drowned bodies of thousands. The sea of blood rose until it reached the mountains of his native Switzerland. An inner voice spoke to him. "Look at it well. It is wholly real, and it will be so." He was shaken, nauseated, ashamed of what he believed was a symptom of his own impending psychosis. The vision repeated itself 2 weeks later, even more vivid, more bloody. He concluded that he was going mad. Then, in the spring and summer of 1914, he had a recurring dream of an Arctic cold wave descending in midsummer, freezing all of Europe, killing all living things. But in the final dream, there was a strange, hopeful twist. He saw a single tree whose frozen leaves had miraculously transformed into sweet grapes, full of healing juice. He plucked them and gave them to a waiting crowd. On August 1st, 1914, the World War broke out. The rivers of blood he had seen were no longer a personal fantasy. They were the horrifying reality of his time. It was then that Jung understood. His task was clear. The breakdown he was experiencing was not just his own. It was a reflection of the sickness of the world. His personal psyche had become a vessel for the collective unconscious, and it was showing him the coming cataclysm. He realized he could not heal his patients or himself without first understanding the strange, terrible, and powerful world that was erupting from within. He had to descend. He had to embark on what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. The Red Book was to be his ship, his logbook, for this journey into the abyss. So how does one begin a conversation with the deepest, most ancient parts of the mind? Jung knew he couldn't simply think his way through it. The rational mind, the ego, was the very thing he needed to bypass. He devised a method, a spiritual technology he would later call active imagination. It was simple, yet required immense courage. He would enter a state of deep meditation, and then he would allow the images from his unconscious to rise. But he would not be a passive observer, as in a dream. He would actively enter the vision. He would speak to the figures he met. He would ask them questions. He would treat his inner world as if it were completely real. His first journey began with the fantasy of digging a hole. He wrote, "I worked and worked so hard that I knew something had to come of it." He descended through the earth into a cave, a dark opening in the rock. Here, the boundary between imagination and reality dissolved. On December 12, 1913, he records a pivotal descent. He finds himself in a dark cave, wading through black water. He sees a luminous red crystal. As he picks it up, the vision unfolds. He hears the flow of underground waters, and on the dark stream, he sees the bloody, severed head of a man. A large black scarab beetle floats by, and in the deepest part of the stream, a red sun shines. 1,000 serpents swarm from the depths, attempting to devour the sun. And then the stream turns into a torrent of thick, red blood. He was terrified but also awestruck. He recognized these symbols. The scarab beetle, an ancient Egyptian symbol of death and rebirth. The serpents, a timeless emblem of both poison and healing, of primordial chaos. The murdered hero, the dying god. His unconscious was not speaking in the language of 20th century psychiatry. It was speaking in the ancient, universal language of myth. It was telling him that a death was necessary. A sacrifice had to be made for a new sun, a new consciousness to be born. In the bloodshed of the war and in his own inner torment, he saw the same terrible, creative process at work. The world was tearing itself apart. And so was he. He wrote, "I myself am a murderer and murdered, sacrificer and sacrificed. The upwelling blood streams out of me." This was the strange genius of Jung. He was living out a myth and documenting it with the precision of a scientist. He was reviving a tradition that had been lost for centuries. He was not just a psychiatrist. He was becoming a modern-day shaman, a psychonaut charting the inner cosmos. During one vision in the depths of a cavern, he asks himself a telling question. An oracle, is this the place of Pythia? He was referring to the Oracle of Delphi in ancient Greece, the most powerful and revered oracle of the ancient world. For centuries, kings, generals, and commoners would make the pilgrimage to the temple of Apollo at Delphi. There, a high priestess known as the Pythia would sit on a tripod over a chasm in the earth, breathing in vapors that would send her into a trance. In this altered state, she would channel the words of the god Apollo, delivering prophecies that would shape the course of history. What Jung realized was that he had, through his own methods, stumbled upon the same psychic space. He had created his own Delphic temple within his own mind. The chasm was his unconscious, and the visions were the voice of a god, not a god on Mount Olympus, but the god within. The immense, creative, and terrifying intelligence that lies dormant in the depths of every human soul. It was in this inner sanctuary that he began to have his most profound encounters. He did not just see symbols. He met living, breathing figures, or rather, personifications of the great psychic forces warring within him. The two most important were an old, wise prophet named Elijah and his beautiful, blind, and deeply unsettling companion, Salome. In a vision dated December 21, 1913, Jung finds himself in a strange, otherworldly house. Elijah, the embodiment of the ancient Hebrew prophet, stands before him. At his feet is a black serpent. With him is Salome. Now, Salome is a notorious figure from the New Testament. She is the temptress whose erotic dance so pleased King Herod that he offered her anything she wanted, and at the urging of her mother, she demanded the head of John the Baptist on a platter. She is a symbol of amoral, destructive, feminine desire. And yet, here she is, presented as the daughter and eternal companion of the holy prophet Elijah. Jung is appalled. He sees her as a bloodthirsty horror, a tiger, stained with the blood of a holy man. But in this vision, she is blind. And when Elijah says, "My wisdom and my daughter are one," Jung cannot comprehend it. He is confronting the central paradox of the human soul, the union of opposites. Elijah represents everything Jung values: wisdom, spirit, consciousness, moral clarity, the logos. Salome represents everything he fears and represses: raw instinct, earthly pleasure, chaotic desire, amoral nature, the eros. In the rational world, these two are mortal enemies: spirit versus flesh, good versus evil. But in the deep logic of the soul, they are inseparable. One cannot exist without the other. Elijah's wisdom is sterile without Salome's life force. Salome's desire is blind and destructive without Elijah's guiding sight. Salome looks at Jung and says, "I love you." He is horrified. He recoils. This is the voice of the shadow, the parts of himself he has rejected, calling for love, for integration. The serpent, which we saw earlier as a symbol of chaos, now appears as a bridge. Jung later writes, "The way of life writhes like the serpent from right to left and from left to right, from thinking to pleasure and from pleasure to thinking." The struggle to unite these two warring forces within himself would become the central drama of the Red Book and the alchemical work of his entire life. He had to learn not to choose between the prophet and the dancer, but to hold them both, to find the wisdom in desire and the life in wisdom. The encounters grew more intense, the symbolism more profound. On Christmas Day, 1913, Jung has a vision that represents the apex of this inner conflict. He sees two massive serpents, one white and one black, locked in a ferocious battle. The black serpent, representing the darkness of the unconscious, seems to be winning. But then it withdraws, and its head and upper body have been turned white. It has not been defeated, it has been transformed. It has integrated a part of its opposite. Elijah, watching from above, tells Jung that this is a temple of the sun, a place that collects light. This vision is a direct illustration of the alchemical process. Out of the struggle of opposites, a new, unified substance is created. But the journey is not over. Jung is then led to the crystal again, the same one from his first descent. He looks into it and sees a horrifying montage of images. A giant's boot crushing a city, the cross, the divine child holding both the white and black serpents. The vision culminates in an experience of unimaginable intensity. Jung feels himself become Christ on the cross. The black serpent coils around his body, squeezing him, and blood streams from him down a mountainside. He is held fast, his arms spread wide in an agonizing posture of crucifixion. This is not a vision of religious dogma. It is the raw, psychological experience of what the crucifixion symbolizes, the ultimate sacrifice of the personal ego for a higher, transpersonal purpose. The I is being dissolved, nailed to the cross of opposites, spirit and matter, life and death. He is the meeting point of the vertical and horizontal, the bridge between heaven and earth. And then, at the foot of his cross, Salome appears. She bends down and wraps her black hair around his feet, weeping. And as she weeps, something incredible happens. The vision states, "I see light, truly she sees. Her eyes are open." This is the climax of the alchemical work. Through his sacrifice, through his willingness to endure the torment of holding the opposites, the blind, instinctual part of his soul, Salome, is healed. Her sight is restored. She is no longer a force of blind destruction, but a redeemed, seeing aspect of the divine feminine. The serpent uncoils from his body. Elijah appears, his form shining like a flame, and tells him, "Your work is fulfilled here." Jung has not become a god. He has become whole. He has integrated his shadow. He has united the prophet and the dancer within his own soul. The divine madness has served its purpose. It has led not to disintegration, but to a higher form of integration, a rebirth. For the rest of his life, Jung would draw from the wellspring of this experience. The Red Book became the central source, the magma from which all his later theories would cool and harden into shape. The archetypes he met, the wise old man, the shadow, the anima, became cornerstones of his psychology. The process of integration he endured, he named individuation. The lifelong journey of becoming the person you were always meant to be, of realizing your unique wholeness. The method he used, active imagination, became a powerful tool in his clinical practice, a way to help others navigate their own inner landscapes. He never published the Red Book during his lifetime. Perhaps he felt the world was not ready for it. Perhaps he felt it was too sacred, too personal a document to be exposed to the cold, analytical gaze of the public. After his death in 1961, his family kept it locked away, protecting his legacy from those who would inevitably use it to label him as insane. It was only in 2009, after decades of scholarly persistence, that his descendants finally agreed to its publication. And when the world finally saw it, it was breathtaking. Not the rambling journal of a lunatic, but a work of profound spiritual art, a modern illuminated manuscript that stands alongside the works of William Blake or Hildegard von Bingen. It is a testament to the fact that the human psyche is not a machine to be fixed, but a mystery to be experienced. It is a story of immense courage. The courage to turn inward when the outer world has cast you out. The courage to face the monsters of your own making. The courage to believe that in your deepest darkness there is a hidden sun waiting to be born. The Red Book is more than a book. It is an invitation. It challenges us to ask, what are the unlived parts of our own souls? What figures are waiting to be met in our own inner worlds? In our modern age, so focused on the external, on the rational, on the quantifiable, Jung's journey is a radical act of reclamation. It reclaims the soul. It reminds us that the greatest adventure is not to be found in exploring the outer world, but in the brave and terrifying descent into the inner one. As Jung himself wrote on the final page, his work was only the beginning. It was the primal material for a task that lay ahead for future generations. For our generation, the Red Book is not a relic of the past. It is a prophecy for the future, a guide for all who are willing to undertake the necessary and divine madness of knowing themselves.